transitioning into this whole thing about metabolic syndrome, one of the biggest issues in healthcare is you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
You know, and with metabolic syndrome, it's really a constellation or a group of things, symptoms, or medical issues that predispose an individual or makes you more likely to develop certain illnesses such as high blood pressure, diabetes, strokes. So if you don't know that you have these things, you're at increased risk for having a heart attack or a stroke in the future. And the reason it's so important to talk about is because most of these things do not have symptoms. So in metabolic syndrome, there's really a constellation, like I said, a group of things that we look for. Elevated blood pressure, elevated fasting sugars, increased weight, in particular around the waist circumference. So it's really kind of that waistline, you know, when you have a larger waistline, a little bit elevated blood pressure, a little bit elevated sugars, we start talking about metabolic syndrome. It's not something that you have and you're stuck with the rest of your life. These are things you can address. And really, the treatment shouldn't be a reflex to just take medications. The best thing you can do for yourself is exercise, eat a healthy diet, lose the weight. And I'm not saying you need to go into a gym and run on a treadmill for an hour a day. We're talking about a 15-minute walk 3 times a day, 20-minute walk 3 times a week. We're talking, the funny thing is when we talk about diet, we always want people to go from 0 to 60, you know, and it's just like, you're eating like this and we want you to eat like this. And it's not realistic. People are going to just kind of blow you off. Oh, you want me to not, I'm Hispanic. There's rice in almost every meal that you eat as a Hispanic. So if I told my Hispanic patients,
as in a black family too,
yeah,
rice is a staple.
If I tell everybody, hey, you need to cut out rice, they're just probably gonna walk out on me.
Right.
So it's, you know, instead of filling up the whole plate with rice and putting the food on top of the rice, let's do a half a plate this time, and then you start working your way down. And that's a more kind of logical, common sense approach to diet and exercise. It doesn't have to be from 0 to 100 from one day to the next, but you have to be working towards a goal.
Right.
You know?
One of the things that was interesting to me is when Dr. Lewis was talking about it, as well as you, is that it's not 0 to 60 or 0 to 100, but making those small changes. And I think that's very important because I'm one of the person that tended to struggle with weight as I got older. Didn't have a problem when I was younger, but as I got older in my 40s, I really struggled with weight. And so I would, you know, I had the ability to do, you know, to go on fad diets, you know, take these shots and you lose all of this weight and then you stop and you gain that plus more back.
Oh, yeah.
And so learning how to just eat healthy and being okay in your own skin, I think was very important for me. And so when we talk about that, even with high blood pressure, because high blood pressure actually runs in my family. It's a part of our DNA. I have a niece who at the time, twin nieces at the time, they may go 90 pounds and had an issue with high blood pressure. And so learning for them to learn how to be able to deal with that. And so once again, when you talk about metabolic syndrome, you talked about your waistline. You said circumference. I'm like, okay. But you're talking the waistline.
Yes.
So when you talk about the waistline, is it the waistline that we drop below out? You know, because the waistline is different for most people. So when you measure waistlines, what are you saying about how do you measure that waistline? And then what are the numbers you're talking about?
Right. So what we're looking at is when we talk about waistline, you can basically take whatever your pant waist size is, your belt size, or but if you wanted to do it more,
is that under your stomach or
under your stomach,
on top of your stomach?
Above your hips, under your stomach. Because
I'm just trying to find out.
No, it's a good question, and you have to specify because some people have stomachs that hang over.
Right.
So you don't want to wrap the tape measure around the stomach. You want to wrap it around the actual waist. So below the stomach.
Okay.
And kind of above the hips in that area.
Well, help me out because, you know, I can work with that. I'm just saying I can work with that. So, yeah, and that's important. I think the other part, too, just talking about metabolic syndrome, when you talk about blood sugars, and you said fasting. So fasting is before you eat anything, your blood sugar is is
Yes, ma'am.
taken,
Yes.
right? And so what should that look like?
So anybody who wakes up that doesn't have any issue with their blood sugar, we expect that blood sugar to be below 100 fasting, which means you haven't eaten yet. So it's usually best to check in the morning because most people don't eat while they're sleeping. So once you wake up, you can check your blood sugars. It should be in about the 70 to 80 range. That's kind of the sweet spot of where it should be when you haven't eaten anything. So once you start seeing that number go up above 100, is when you start really paying attention to it. The problem is there's no other way to know unless you check with a finger stick or with blood work at the doctor's office, because you can't just lick your skin and say, oh, I taste a little sweet this morning.
I don't know, Doc. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm sure you've been told, but there's no science behind the licking the skin technique.
Okay.
And it's the same with blood pressure too. You won't know if you have high blood pressure a lot of times until it's too late.
Yes.
So, I think the important take home isn't so much that it's important to know that there's a thing called metabolic syndrome, what makes up metabolic syndrome, and what the negative outcomes can be. I think the real take home is make sure you're getting yourself checked out. Because if you know about metabolic syndrome or not, or if you know about blood pressure and diabetes or not, it doesn't change if you have it or not.
Right.
So most people will go through their whole life thinking that they're healthy and they're fine until they go and see a doctor in their 40s and 50s, only to find out that they have full-fledged, diabetes or hypertension or high blood pressure that needs treatment with medications. Where if they had been getting their checkups all along, we would have found it earlier and been able to address it a different way.